Okay, it says that we are live now. Okay, great. So I am Juno, and can you state your name?
Sure, Len Mihalovich. Nice to meet you, Juno.
Nice to meet you as well. Very excited to talk today. I like your setup, by the way. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Hey, so maybe we can just start off with you talking about any of your comic books.
Sure. I can keep you busy for a long time talking about any of my comic books. So, yeah. So I like I told you over email, I've been in this for a while. Way back in the early 90s, I decided for some strange reason that I wanted to start doing a little more with my life and being a consummate storyteller and, just always entertaining my friends and being avid comic fan for my whole life. I just thought I'd try it. I can't draw. So that left me with writing stories and creating stories, which I found fascinating. So I suffered from something that all of us do when we graduate from high school or college or decide to do something. It's what I like to call the here I am world syndrome. So you think that just because I want to do something, everybody else in the world is going to be excited about it. But that's usually not the case for all of us. So here I am world. So of course I reached out to Marvel, I reached out to DC, I reached out to Dark Horse, I reached out to Image, I reached out to Archie. Here's all my great ideas for, your comic book characters and here's some fantastic story ideas. And they said, "We're all set. Thank you." And I have a really nice collection of rejection letters. I have the Marvel one on my website because it inspires me. Because the Dark Horse person gave me a great piece of advice. Said, if you want to break into writing, we're real concerned with what you've already written. So you have nothing published, you just started out as a comic book writer. And just by declaring yourself a comic book writer, we're not going to put, financial backing to you just for some story ideas, which made sense. I didn't want to think of it that way, but comics are a business and, that's it's what they're all about. So she suggested that I just write and I go and write and find some people that would be willing to publish it, would be willing to read it. So I did. I did some fanzines. I did, a lot of fiction type work. And then all of a sudden, I, you know, got a lot of interest and I got people starting to actually pay me for it. Wasn't a lot of money, but okay. And then part two of her suggestion is when I had done that, um, create my own unique stories and start pitching them maybe to not the largest publishers on the planet of comics, but maybe something a little bit smaller. And so I did. I pitched my story called Section 12 to a comic company in Springfield called Dilemma, and they loved it. And it ran for 4 issues back in the early 90s, and it did great. And Dilemma had some other things going on, so they ended up closing their doors for a little while. So we went and took Section 12 to another larger company in 97 called Mythic Comics. So Mythic Comics sadly was only 1 issue. Their last official act before Mythic closed the doors and went out of business was to mail me back all the artwork for issue number 2. So they suffered from the same thing in the late 90s everybody else did, the whole publisher implosion, which was not indie comic friendly. So then I kind of took a break from it. I started buying and selling some comic artwork. I worked with some artists and we did commission pieces and I learned how to comic color and we put out a couple of sets of trading cards. So I wasn't idle by any stretch of the imagination, but I had just had enough of indie comics at that point. So we did that for a number of years and we just our small group from Dilemma just kind of evaporated a little bit. So it wasn't until 2012, I think, or 2013 that we started back up. And that's actually a funny story. So I'm going to segue right into my next story. So um in my real job, a lot of us indie comics guys have real jobs. We don't do this full time. I am an IT consultant and I fly to wherever my client needs me to. So I was flying to Detroit on a weekly basis. So I get on a plane on Monday, I fly to Detroit, I work for the week, and I come home on Thursday night. So that was, we see a lot of the same cast of characters doing that. So there was this one guy, and what he did was he carried too many bags on the plane, and he made it so that we all had to check our bags because everybody's allowed to carry two. He was carrying like 4 or 5 bags. So I took it up with social media, and I posted my grievances on there, and I got a lot of likes and a lot of funny remarks. And then the next week, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take all my social media fans and I'm gonna give them a treat. I'm gonna get up at I'm gonna get to that airport at 5 o'clock in the morning for that 7 o'clock flight, and I'm gonna stand there, and he is not gonna get in front of me. And so I did. And then the flight attendant gate agent calls for boarding, and this guy comes up in his tracksuit with his four bags. He always wore this same running suit, so it was easy to identify him every week. So this tracksuit man comes and he fake limps over there and says, as soon as the gate agent says, "Does anybody with any special need any time or assistance? We're going to let them get on the plane early." So he fake limps over there. He scans himself in, and then he starts laughing and running down the jetway. So I was like, "Oh, I gotta post something on there." So I, snapped a picture of it, posted it up on Facebook, started getting a lot of likes. And then the next week, something else happened that was a little bit different, but still the same. Then the next week and the next week. And so what I didn't realize about some of these social media sites is when you check into like the airport and you post, everybody who checked into the airport can see it, not just your friends. I thought I was just sharing this with my friends. So I'm getting all these weird friend requests and everything like that. And all of a sudden, this is really popular. I'm getting a lot of traction with this. So my friend Mike, who I did comic books with back at Dilemma, said, "You just had the greatest comic book story drop on your lap. I can't believe you're not doing it." So Tracksuit Man was born. So it's a social media book. This is the week that what happened, and these are the actual posts. Oh, okay. So this is what got me back into comic books.
That is awesome.
So it's a true story. It all happened. So Tracksuit Man got me back into comic books. Now this was funny because this is me doing a comic book without all my friends. So with the Section 12 ones, it was all my friends. They knew how to draw. I just wrote the scripts and I didn't do anything else. They knew how to draw. They knew how to, pre-press it, all of that. This was me doing it all on my own. And it was about 2 weeks away from publishing. And I start getting phone calls from these guys. "Hey, can I do a page? Can I do can I do the back cover? Can I do this?" And it's like, "Oh, you guys are all coming out of the woodwork. This is great." So of course I said yes, and it was great. So all of a sudden the team is back together, which is fantastic. And then these guys are like, "Well, what do you want to do next?" And I'm like, "Okay, if you guys want to do comic books, let's create some comic books again. Um, but let's do it for fun this time. Let's not get involved with Diamond and have pallets of, thousands of comic books sitting in my garage where, I spend thousands of dollars printing these up. We're going to use smaller print runs. So I found a shop that did small print runs, and we're going to take what we need. We're going to sell them in stores. We're going to sell them in shows. We're going to sell them on the internet, and we're going to do electronic download copies that are very affordable for people. So it's a good way to get our stories out there. So Section 12 came back in 20. It took me 2 years to do this one, and then it took me another 2 years to do this one because I was figuring it out. So now, back then, we did one comic every 2 years. This year, we're going to do 5 comics in a year. So, and this is all of us doing it part time. We don't do this full time. So that's how we got back in action with first with Tracksuit Man and then Section 12. Now, your next question is, what is Section 12 about? Of course. Section 12 is the series that I came up with that was before the X Files, before conspiracy theory. It's about a secret government organization that hides all of the scientific failures. So we assume that scientific successes, there's press releases, there's TV specials, everything about that, but we never hear about the failures. So what happened to all the failures? So I just said maybe there's this secret government organization that sweeps them all under the rug because it's all bad press, bad for business, tech, bad technology. And what about the real comic booky scientific failures where like you're a human subject and you get superpowers? So that's kind of fun. So we're gonna explore that aspect of it. And what if they're blackmailing these people that got these superpowers and really don't want them for a cure? So we are doing stories like that. It's classic old school superhero kind of stuff, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Those are definitely great stories.
Thank you.
Wait, so what year did you decide it, or like how old were you when you decided that you wanted to get into the comics?
When I first did it back in the 90s, 29 years old. I tried, whitewater rafting. I chickened out to do bungee jumping, but I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get something written. I'm gonna, sing karaoke. I'm gonna do all of these things. So that was kind of fun.
Definitely understand that myself. Let's see. Ah. So when you're writing, how do you approach character development in your comics, and how do you decide when to make changes to an established character?
So I think it's important to keep it fluid. So I think your greater question is probably let me see if I can find it here. I put out all my comic books here because I knew certain questions you were going to ask. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is my character Wonder Pro. He's a super speed guy. Okay. And Wonder Pro is a real infomercially sounding name that I came up with. And he's this guy who volunteered for, yeah, I have to put it right in front of my face so you can see it, for medical experiments for this diet pill company. And they gave him an injectable medication, and all of a sudden it sped up his metabolism to the point where he has super speed. Unlike the Flash, he doesn't have super reflexes, so he always bumps into things. So he used his work study job at Harvard to put on all of the athletic pads and equipment that he possibly could find so he doesn't hurt himself. And of course, what's the first thing you want to do when you get superpowers? You want to go rob a bank, right? So, Wonder Pro is based on a conversation that I had with my cousin during a family cookout. My cousin was going to an Ivy League school and he was having problems paying some of the tuition bills. He had dropped out some of his scholarships and everything had dropped and he was really struggling. So what he did was he made himself a test subject for some of these medical drug trials. And the medical drug trials are very specific that you're only going to do one. Well, he was doing about 6 of them at the same time. So my brain immediately goes to, wow, what if he got superpowers? So that's how we came up with a character like that. Now, Wonder Pro has evolved, which is the second part of your question. How do I, approach character development? I keep it fluid as the stories go and as the new stories come in. I'm like, how can I engage the characters in the story and who out of my inventory of characters in section 12 now, who does it make the most sense to include? Because when you have an ensemble cast, you can't always include everybody. At the very beginning of section 12 in the first issue, I had a character called Lieutenant Batterson. And he was a guy who woke up and all of a sudden he's in this secret government facility and he's trying to figure out what's going on. So, right along with the reader, he's the one that figures out what's going on. So, he was my hero, he was my everyman. And less and less I have needed him because the other characters started to develop and, quite frankly, were a lot more interesting. So I'm using Batterson less and less to explain things to the reader because the reader is now fully along for the ride because we're 7 issues into these things now. So they've been around for a while. So I guess the short answer, stay fluid. Long answer, that's how I did it. And you're on mute.
Thanks.
No problem.
Um, what is your typical process for developing a comic book storyline?
Um, like I said, it comes with, and this is what I tell everybody when they ask me about writing. Okay, how do you write? Writing a comic script is very different from writing a novel or a short story or a television script. It's its own animal. So you have to actually, because we throw that whole Marvel way thing out the window where Stan didn't want to do all the work and he had the artist do everything. Um, we do full scripts. So the full script is we start with concepts. All right. So the concept that I'm working on right now is we were playing Nintendo. Yeah, we were playing the Wii and we were um we were sorry. We were playing Mario Kart. That was it. And I'm like, this is fun. What if my characters were in this racing each other instead of just me and my family sitting here on the couch? So we came up with an idea of a VR apparatus that would bring them actually into the game. And then we could have a lot of fun with that. So we come up with a basic premise like that. Then we do an outline. An outline consists of everything that we want to happen in the comic book itself. So I kind of make a list and then I put it together chronologically how it's going to happen. After that, we take that and I do a page by page. So I say the first outline was everything that's going to happen in the comic book. And now it's everything that's going to happen on the page. After everything that's going to happen on the page, I distill that out into a full script with dialogue, number of panels, panel descriptions, and things like that. So that is the actual process. After that, it goes to the artist, and the artist will send me what's called roughs or thumbnails. So they figure out logistically how everything's going to work because it's visual storytelling. We have to do it in a way that makes sense to the reader, left to right, and and up to down. So after that, then we go to the inking phase. Then it actually comes back to me to do the coloring, formatting for the comic book size for the printer, and the digital lettering. So that, in a nutshell, is the process.
I love that. I'm always wondering exactly how the process is because you can find it online, but it's not the same as hearing it from, somebody who actually is in the field.
Yeah, so the first, like I said, the first one took me 2 years, and then the second one took me a year, and then the third one I was doing 3 a year, and now we're at 4 a year, and this year our goal is 5. So, it as your team grows, you keep everybody working all at once. So when we were doing one every 2 years, we had the luxury of just working on one book. There was a lot of back and forth, things like that. Now we're working on 3 or 4 books at any one given time. Right now, I'm writing 5 different scripts. So just to keep things going, because the more we can produce, the more we can engage our readers.
And how much people are on your team?
Um, it It varies. We have myself, Phil Miller, Mike Kelleher. We have a couple of coloring assistants that help me with the coloring and flatting, and that's variable. There's probably a pool of about 5 or 6 people who's ever available. I'll have jump in. The same with helping me out with the coloring. So anywhere from I mean I think the most we've had is we've had like 37 people, 37 different people working on all of these comics. I produced 22 comics so far. So out of that, there's been 37 different people. And now it's probably trimmed down to about a good 7 or 8 with any regularity.
That is some big numbers. 22 comics, that's something to be proud of. That's amazing.
It is. So I just looked back and I looked at that date on Tracksuit Man. So I've been May. It says May of 2014. So this is official. I've been at this for 10 years. It doesn't feel like it, but yeah,
Oh, congrats, 10 years.
yeah.
22
So
is my lucky
wow,
number. I love that
is
number.
it? Yeah.
Yes.
3 is my lucky number, which is why it's section 12 because section 3 didn't sound too good, but 1 plus 2 equals 3. So I'm loyal to my lucky numbers too.
And what do you think makes a successful comic book series?
Um, so what I think is that sometimes we need to change our definition of success. Um, so the motto of my company is comics done for fun. So we don't make a lot of money doing this, but we have a pretty strong readership. And I think a successful comic, the last comic, um, I had to actually change my order for the printer because when I announced on Facebook that the comic was being published, I got so many pre-orders that I had to actually up my order with a printer, which is that to me is a success story. Indie comics don't get a lot of traction. They don't get a lot of shelf space in stores. There's a lot of people in the pool competing with you. So when you can do something like that, I'll call that a success all day long.
That does sound very successful. Um, and how many, like, do you go to Comic Cons or go out and tables
Yeah, I
at,
do.
like,
So I have a rule about them. I do as many as my
Here's the
family life
forecast
will
for tomorrow
permit.
in Buffalo. Look for showers with a high of
Um,
55 degrees Fahrenheit
so
and a
I
low of
I
48
tend to
degrees.
stay away from the larger comic conventions because they are more shows about TV stars and movie stars and things like that. So I mean, I did the Rhode Island Comic Con because that was local to us. We had maybe 100,000 people go by our table. Most of the people looked and said, "This is great, but I don't have any money because I paid $100 to get in here. I paid $30 to park, and now I'm going to go get Doctor Who's autograph, and that's $90. So I'm out of money. Sorry, you know."
oh,
And so we just realized that that's not the show for us. So I just did IC3 in New Haven, which was just indie comics. We did fantastic at a show like that. I'm going to do the Comic and Toy Palooza in Fall River next weekend. That is full of indie comic creators, and it's also full of people who are interested in our kind of comics because I'm not here selling X-Men or Batman or anything like that. I'm here selling my own comics. So people have to be open to that and open to, exploring new characters. And I love to go to these shows and talk about my comic because if I can go back and have maybe, a dozen or so new readers that are going to be interested and engaged in this, I'll call that a win.
okay. All right. Let's see. And what do you hope that readers take away from your comics?
So, what do I hope that readers take away from their comics? So again, we're having fun. So growing up, I turned to comic books a lot because it was a little bit of an escape when life got a little stressful. And I'd like to, pay that forward and pay that back and just give people the opportunity to do that with some great old school stories. We're doing some, and I wanted to tell you about this too. We're doing some unusual things with our comics that not every indie creator is too. And I hope people can recognize and appreciate that. And I want to just show you. So I had I have 3 Section 12 series. Okay? And go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I have Section 12 Flashback, which is the one that I started in the 90s, and I've continued it, and we're going through, and it's a very strong storyline. We had an argument when we started this. Should we keep this in 1994, or should we put this story in the modern age? Wouldn't it be great if they're walking around with cell phones and GPSs and things like that? Or do we want to make that, this mystery technology? So, being the guy that I am and owning the company, I said I want to do both. So, we have Section 12 Flashback set in 1994. And then we came up with Section 12 Declassified, which is set in the present day. So Declassified is about this kid who's hired to clean out somebody's basement, and her dead husband was a hoarder, and he used to work at Section 12, and he was stealing all the stuff. So they found all of the hard drives, all of the guard helmets, all of the technology there, and they're trying to figure out what it all means and what to do with it. And now they're trying to find other evidence of Section 12 because it's always been a myth. There was this reporter who was discredited, and she couldn't prove that she was abducted by Section 12 or it even exists because everything just disappeared. So they're on the treasure hunt for the truth, is what I call it, because they're trying to find evidence of Section 12. And this kid finding all these boxes in this woman's basement is the first step to that. So my universe didn't get wide, it got deep because there's 1994 and there's now. So there's 2 stories going on, and they actually interrelate with each other, which is kind of fun. But we also have Section 12 Lost Adventures, which is all of the scripts that I wrote back when I was with Dilemma that we never got to produce. So I had written a couple of them, and I made them into comic books, which was great. But then I ran out of Lost Adventures. I didn't have any Lost Adventures anymore. So, do I cancel it? What do I do? So I look back at my notes of things that I wanted to do when I was with Dilemma, and I wanted to team up with other indie comic characters. So, and I had a list of them. Now, all of these indie comics are gone because it was the 90s. It's like they've all, they went their 1 or 2 issue runs, and that was it. So I went on the internet and I started contacting these people. There was this guy, Fly Guy, who came out in 1992. I contacted him. I'm like, can I use your character? He's like, sure. So Fly Guy returns in Section 12. And then we had we had Nun Troll from Dilemma. So we put Nun Troll in a comic book. I even got a 1-page cameo from a very famous indie comic, Megaton Man. So Don Simpson allowed me to put him in there too. So that was fantastic. So we're doing a lot of things like that. And then I wanted to push the envelope even more. And this is the one that sold out that I was telling you about. As soon as I can find it over here. All right, here it is. So back in the 90s, there was this really cool, it was called Amusement Films. And what we were doing with comic books, they were doing with movies. So they had a live action superhero movie called El Frenetico and Go Girl. It's a Mexican wrestler and a kung fu superhero teamed up to fight crime. It was campy like the old Batman series, and it was just a lot of fun. And if anybody El Frenetico and Go Girl. Look it up on YouTube. The first episode's still up there for free. You can watch it in all its campy glory. So I contacted this guy who owns the characters, and I said, I'd love to use your characters. Your characters deserve to be in comic books. They've never been in comic books before. We would love to put them in comic books. So we did. It was great. We and I, in the true Batman style, I gave them themed supervillains. So these supervillains are called the knockoffs, and they are all victims of bad toy accidents that gave them superpowers. So it was a lot of fun to do. It sold out as soon as we announced it. I had to go back to the printer literally and just order more before he did the run so that we would have enough to sell at shows and things too. So that was a lot of fun. So what I hope that people can recognize and appreciate is how much we push the envelope with things like that. And the other thing is, we don't. The question you're probably going to ask me is, do you just do section 12? No, we don't just do section 12. We do other things too. Phil Miller, our lead artist, said, I would love to do a comic book about the old West and cowboys and things like that. And I was wanting to do something with all of these 1950s characters that were just abandoned. They're called public domain. So they're golden age characters. And we did Red Mask Rides Again, which is he's amazingly like the Lone Ranger, but he just never really caught on. He was in, like, I don't know, probably about 40 issues, and then the company went out of business. So everything there is in public domain. So I reprinted his origin in the back, and I don't want to just sit here and do a reprint book. So we did, we did our own stuff, which the art is absolutely gorgeous in this book. It's some of the best work Phil has ever done. So Red Mask Rides Again, pick it up. Another one is, I did the Wild West Adventures of Buffalo Bill. And what I wanted to do was take history and kind of twist it, because this is a real character, and he had a Wild West show that was very popular at the time. So I said, what if we took his Wild West show and made him want to make more money with it, like anyone would? So what if we make it into a carnival too? So he's got a carnival component. Now, carnival lets me have sideshow freaks in there, and we have things like, a carnival of people that go around the country at the time and see and do all kinds of things. So it just opens us up for the real mysteries. But what I also love is, I love Easter eggs. So I put, let's see. Okay, there we go. Right there. I put some of the sideshow freaks are actually literary references of the time, of science fiction, a lot of Jules Verne stuff and things like that you can see and catch in there. So that was also a lot of fun. And we did a character called the Avenger for a company called Yeet. And it is a golden age character where he fights. It was a very simple character, and I can see why they abandoned it after 4 issues. He was basically on a revenge kick against communists. So he was very polarized about people's political beliefs and used to just beat up commies. So I took that story and I twisted it and I changed it because I didn't like that very much. So what I did was I made it into a things aren't always as they seem. So when you see these stories on the very surface, they look like a golden age story where it's like, the hero sees the bad guy, the hero wins against the bad guy, and that's that. But what I've done is I've introduced a photojournalist sidekick that I created myself, who will explain to the reader and the Avenger himself, what's really going on. So in this issue, it's a robot that is attacking the park. And so he comes in and he smashes the robot. He's attacking the park, but there's a kid trapped inside the robot. The robot, didn't just start walking. The kid went inside and he got trapped in there, and he's walking and he's trying to find help. So there's more to the story than meets the eye. So that's the theme of this series, and we have one of these coming out later on this year with an all new story that's just really that I'm excited about. And lastly, we have the Fantastic Fanboys Adventures. So this is 4 kids who love to write comic books. They get together and they write comic books, and it will resonate with a lot of people because they write really stupid comic books. Okay. The writer gets together and he pitches a story to his crew, and the crew ends up laughing at him. And then they tell him all the things that can go wrong with it. So this one is the superhero straps a giant bottle rocket to himself and blasts off into the sky to capture some bank robbers. And the kids are like, well, don't bottle rockets blow up when they run out of steam? How would you steer a bottle rocket? And there's all kinds of things. So they just anybody who's into comic books will appreciate the fact that comic readers like to nitpick everything. So we're kind of embracing that concept, and we're actually helping you along with it. And it's kind of fun.
I think I really like the story of Section 12, and I actually might get some of those comics myself because they seem very interesting. And
Thank you.
according to the comments we have, it doesn't look like I'm alone. A lot of people seem pretty interested in it as well.
Well, that's fantastic.
Do you mind if we answer a question that was in the comments?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, it said, how did you develop the story of each of your comics? Were there any other artists' works that inspired you or continue to inspire you?
So being the being the writer, I approach it from a different tact than maybe Phil Miller, who's the artist. Phil Miller used to draw exactly like John Buscema, and his style has evolved from there. So if you look at, Section 12 flashback number 1, you're going to see very Buscema-esque kinds of figures. And then after that, he really evolves into his own style and makes the characters his own, which is fantastic. Now, are there writers who inspire me? Yeah. Peter David was the writer who inspired me when I read an article about that he did in the Comic Buyer's Guide a long time ago. He was like, this is if you want to write comics, this is what you do. But you have to be, just bold enough to try and do it on your own. And I did that, and I'm very happy I couldn't follow his thing boilerplate, but I'm realizing in indie comics you kind of have to make your own rules. You have to go with what works. You have to abandon what doesn't, and just kind of be fluid in your approach to everything. Um, and as far as how we develop our stories, I'm always watching life happen, and most of my characters don't have random throwaway names anymore. I don't do that. I Most characters are named after somebody. Could be my mailman, could be, somebody special, somebody important. You never know. So there's everything means something now. And I love when people come to comic shows. We had a couple of kids in Utica, New York, and they came to the comic show and they said, "Oh, is the latest Section 12 here?" And I said, "Yep." And they went and they did it. They read the whole thing in the waiting area outside, and then they came back and they asked me about all the Easter eggs that I put in there, and they found them all, which just was thrilling to me as a writer. So I love that people enjoy that.
This was actually going to be one of my questions also. But somebody asked it in the comment. How do you recommend young writers get started creating their own comics, especially in regards to world building, character development, and others?
So I just did an author's talk. My wife is a teacher, so I did an author's talk at her school a couple of weeks ago, and this came up. The best way that you can write is to write, and practice your craft and get better at it. And you can also read and start reading less like an audience member and more like a creator, and look at the nuts and bolts of how each story is constructed. Look at story arc versus character arc, antagonist versus protagonist, and start to understand all the things that the creators of these comic books that you enjoy struggled with. Find out what you like, find out what you don't like, embrace those ideas and try and learn from them. There's a lot of great examples that we can learn from out there, and that's what I would do. I'm still learning. Everybody's still learning. So it's just get in the pool and start to swim, and you'll learn how.
Okay, let's see. All right. And when you get feedback or criticism, how do you handle it?
um so I've learned to it's hard because you tend to take everything personally because we are people, we're putting our work out there. Being a creative, it's like, you're exposing part of yourself, and you worked hard on this, so of course you want everybody to like it, but it's not going to be to everybody's taste. And that they don't hate you, they're just not in alignment with what you were trying to do, and maybe they don't appreciate it yet, or maybe they never will. And you have to realize that, maybe everybody isn't your audience too. Because I remember the first time held up, I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I passed out copies of my Section 12 comic, and I held it up, and I was talking about the whole creative process. And this woman was like, she raised her hand to ask a question. She said, "I don't like this." And I'm like, okay. And she was like this, 70-year-old woman. And it's like, I don't think she's bought a lot of comic books in her life. So I don't think that there was anything I was going to produce that was going to make her into a lifelong comic fan. Um, so I realized that you're not going to keep everybody happy. You can't take everything personally, and when somebody gives you some feedback or a bad review or whatever, think about what it was like from their standpoint, and do they have any valid points that you can learn from. Again, comes back to, you're learning all the time, you're trying to improve yourself all the time. There were some reviews for Tracksuit Man that weren't favorable that I got, and there were some mistakes that I made that I learned about in comic books, and I've corrected them. So it's a process. You go and you continue refining your process. I mean, and for every bad review I've gotten 5 or 6 good reviews to counteract it. So somebody likes it.
Okay. And what do you think are some common misconceptions about the comic book industry?
That we make a lot of money. um Most people don't make a lot of money. They're the big two are having problems. We're not a print media society anymore. I was amazed after visiting with this school and talking about it, that so many people were interested in comic books and they wanted to buy them. And then I had to stop and think, I'm like, where are these kids going to buy comics now? There's no more newsstands. They don't sell them in drugstores. They don't sell them in Barnes and Noble anymore. They just sell graphic novels. So, there are no places besides, comic shows, the internet, and comic stores that you can actually buy comic books. So it's one of those things where it's I understand you know, why they got excited about it like that.
That is very interesting. And yes, that does seem to be an issue.
Yeah, it's
That is,
it's always a problem. It's always a problem getting the word out. And that's probably some of the biggest challenges. And that's a misconception um when you think that because I have a comic book out, am I happy with 10,000 copies? Yeah, I'd be thrilled with that. But, the reality of it is even Spider-Man isn't selling 10,000 copies every month. So they don't sell as many as you think anymore because there's nowhere for people to buy them. And that's one of the big problems. So if I go, like I said, if I go to a show and I've captured a dozen new readers, now that could mean that I've sold 12 comics or I've sold, all 22 to all 12 people, either way, that's a good day because if they want to know when my next comic is coming out, then I've gotten a new reader. I've gotten somebody else interested in the story. And that's my personal goal is to get more readers and grow my audience one reader at a time.
I did hear from a lot of comic book writers how the biggest misconception is how they make a lot of money. So I guess that really is something big.
Yeah, it is because even when I stopped wanting to be a professional comic book writer, when I was telling you I went to all of the DC and Marvel and everything, there was a there was an article in I think a local newspaper and it posted all the salaries of different occupations and I saw the comic book writer and I'm like, I'm making more money than this right now. It's like I don't think I could take the hit and pay to just go do this full time. And
Yeah, that
you'll
definitely
find as
really.
you talk to more and more indie comic guys, you'll find that everybody does something else. And even at the professional level, I know Peter David when back in his day when he was on, 3 or 4 top tier Marvel titles, he was also writing Star Trek books just to pay the bills.
Do you use social media to help promote your book to get more buyers?
I
Or
do. And that's how I was able to sell out with Lost Adventures 7 as I posted it up on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Um, and I want to get into it more. I did one TikTok video as an experiment, but I want to do more. And the sky's the limit. But again, do I spend the time promoting the comics I have, or do I spend the time creating the new comics? And that's always the struggle is balancing that.
so we'll do the last question and then we'll answer the last questions that are in
Sure.
the comments. If anybody else wants to drop questions, feel free to. Okay. So where can we find your comic book to purchase it at?
So the easiest way is Lenovations Press. Your thing's blocking it, but um, but yeah, lenovationspress.com is we're selling everything there and we also have links to all the other places that sell it because we sell on drivethroughcomics.com so you can get most of my comics for $1 or 2 on a digital download. If you want the print copies, it's probably best to either go to Indie Planet or Lenovations Press and get those fulfilled there. Um i i am on Amazon Kindle for a few of them through Comicology, and we do shows and you know that's yeah, that's probably the best way to get them. And
Hmm.
of course I have a Patreon, so Patreon people get things. I'm just not used to that. Patreon people get things first, they get things quickly, they get surprise bonuses. Sometimes it's art, sometimes it's stickers, sometimes it's pins. What whatever will fit in that envelope, I'll generally stuff it pretty full before I mail anything out.
How much is to sub to your Patreon?
The Patreon has different tiers. And embarrassingly, I don't know, so I'm going to look right now. Don't we love the internet? Okay, so the Patreon tiers are somewhere. Okay. So the Patreon tiers are $3 for a digital download. I don't charge by the month. I only charge by the release. So if I'm doing 3 or 4 comics a year, I'm only going to bill you 3 or 4 times a year. So digital downloads are $3 each. And the one where I mail you a comic book is $12 each. And like I said, I don't think I've sent it out with just a comic book in there. There's always been stickers or swag or pins or patches, or we'll throw a sketch card in there or something sometime. And for Halloween, I mailed all of my Patreons a free comic book and I said trick or treat. So we try to do fun stuff like that.
Halloween's the greatest.
One of my favorite holidays.
All right, so we have only, looks like 2 comments here full of questions. Okay. First one says, are there any past work of yours that you're less than proud of, or things that you could have written differently now that you're older?
Well, yeah. I did Section 12 over. I mean, I did The Dilemma Presents was it was fun. It was a good story, and we made it better. So I try and not look back. I try and move forward. Is there anything that I'm not really proud of that's out there? No. I'm everything that I did, I'm proud of. I'll stand behind it. For the technology and the story at the time back in 1993, the Section 12 was a good comic compared to others. But if you look at the same thing today and you compare Flashback 1 to Dilemma Presents 1, yeah, you're gonna like Flashback 1 better. It's in color, the art is sharper, it's digitally lettered, it's not hand lettered. So there's a lot of things. I love publishing comic books in the 21st century more than the 20th century. In the 20th century, it wasn't as competitive. In the 21st century, it's more competitive, but it's a lot more fun.
And the last question that we have here, it says, have you considered branching out into webcomics, even if it's just converting pre-existing work into digital medium?
We've thrown that out a lot, and we've talked a lot about that. And one of the guys I work with, Michael Kelleher, is actually doing his book Legend Killer, which is now called Ages, as a digital comic, and he's got this motion thing going, which is a lot of fun. But again, and it's a choice of there's only so many hours in the week. There's only so many of us. So we're about at 8 or 9 titles right now, and we're trying to do 5 comics a year, and that kind of pegs us out as far as time. We're just slammed for time. So to redo everything with the web comics, I'd have to actually find somebody who would be interested in coming on board and helping us with that, because it's not. I want to move forward with these stories, while there's still a demand for it, while there's still printers and distribution systems that I can utilize, because you never know how the world's going to change. So I'd rather move forward with that rather than doing web comics. If I had started out as web comics, I'd probably be strong in that realm, but I'm not. Right now, we'll have to settle for the digital downloads, which are actually pretty good too. It's a good, affordable way to read all of this stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'm very glad I had you here today. I learned a lot, and it was very interesting. I'm definitely going to check
Thank you.
out some of your comics, especially the
Thank you
Section
very
12.
much. Okay. Yeah. Lenovationspress.com. Everything is on there. And you know what? I'll tell everybody who's listening, the first one is free. Section 12 Flashback is totally free on our website. You can go just read it. So no,
Nice.
I'm not asking for your email. I'm not asking for anything. There's a website up there with every single page on there. And I put it up there during COVID. I'm leaving it up there. So the first one is free.
I love it. And I hope to have you back again for another interview soon, perhaps.
I would love to. Okay. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Problem, and we are done here. So I'm gonna end it now.